Thank you for having me here today. I'm Jingbo Hou, a fourth-year PhD candidate from W. Carey Business School at ASU. Today, I'm going to present a joint work with Dr. Chen Liang from UConn, Dr. Pei Chen from the Arizona State University, my advisor, and Dr. Bing Gu from BU. Can telework reduce the unequal impacts of COVID-19 disaster on job losses across different genders? As we all know, the disasters usually pose a threat to work continuity and job stability. For instance, during the COVID-19, many jobs are either interrupted or lost, and they observe an overall negative impact of the COVID-19 on labor market outcomes. Even worse, the impact of COVID-19 on labor market outcomes is bad in a bad way. Why we say this? Why we say it's bad in a bad way? Specifically, the disaster not only has a negative impact on workers' employment in general, but it also enlarges the gender inequality. Fortunately, telework is a silver lining in disaster management. And here, telework is defined as a kind of work flexibility arrangements under which an employee performs the job duties and responsibilities from an approved work site other than the traditional workplace. Nowadays, telework is an important aspect of the disaster management. According to the data from BLS, in September 2020, over 800,000 females left workplace. This figure is 4 times more than the figure of males. This suggests that there might be a gender inequality in labor market outcomes during the pandemic. While telework might help people's work outcomes, it is still unknown whether telework can mitigate the gender inequality in unemployment during the COVID-19 disaster. On the one hand, females have a greater need for flexibility to alleviate the work and life conflict, suggesting that telework may play a more beneficial role in females than males. However, on the other hand, recent literature suggests that females need to take more household responsibilities, and they may have to sacrifice their jobs for their family or be disrupted while working with their kids around. In another word, the uneven distribution of household work may stop females from fully taking advantage of the telework. Therefore, it is still an open question that whether telework can reduce the gender gap during the pandemic. Formally, we are interested in the following research questions. The first one is about gender inequality. We want to examine, does COVID-19 disaster increases the gender inequality in labor market outcomes? The second one is about the main effect of telework. Does telework mitigate unemployment problem during the COVID-19 disaster? The third one is about gender heterogeneity. Can telework mitigate the gender inequality in unemployment during the COVID-19 disaster? The last one, since we are the AI scholars, we want to examine how the digital information infrastructure plays a role in terms of the telework. So we want to answer, can digital infrastructure accessibility address the mitigation effect of telework? One empirical challenge here to answer our research questions is that gender heterogeneity is the effect of telework, could be either due to the self-selection or due to the differential impacts of telework. To distinguish both effects, we decompose the heterogeneity into the effect of telework. In the effect of telework into the proportions due to the gender difference in the telework rates and proportions due to the gender difference in the marginal effect of telework. So here is our research framework. First, we examine whether the COVID-19 disaster has equal impacts on different genders. And then we further investigate whether the telework can mitigate the gender inequality on employment during the disasters. So we can show that 2 potential effects of telework. The first one is the endowment effect due to the gender difference in the telework take-up rates. And the second one is the coefficient effect due to the gender difference in the marginal effect of telework. To answer our research questions and implement our research design, we compile a rich data set using the CPS monthly survey from BLS. we use occupation-based telework penetration rate during the COVID-19 based on the CPI supplemental data. We also merge our data set with the Internet Access Index data, later we called IAI data set. This IAI data set serves as a general measure of the Internet accessibility. This is very comprehensive since we consider multiple factors, including the Internet quality and availability, and also the public availability to subscribe to the Internet. Our observational window including the 2019 and 2020. We first examine whether there is gender inequality during the COVID-19 disaster on employment. We use the COVID-19 disaster declaration to define our disaster dummy. With the help of this dummy, we know whether an observation is before or after the disaster. And then we measure labor market outcomes using 3 different measurements, including whether an individual is unemployed, absent from work, and laid off. And also, we try to compile a comparable sample between males and females using the CEM mesh data set. We measure males and females based on their age, education, occupation, industry, and so on. What we found is that disasters have a larger negative impact on females than males, indicated by the second row, the interaction between the disaster and female. And next, we try to understand whether telework can mitigate the unemployment problem during the disaster. Here, we use occupation-based teleworker penetration rate to measure the telework intensity. Specifically, the telework penetration rate means that the percentage of workers in that occupation were teleworking during the COVID-19. Essentially, we want to examine whether the workers of occupation with higher telework penetration rates can have better employment outcomes during the COVID-19. We control for the individual fixed effects, industry fixed effect, occupation fixed effect, and time-varying demand shocks by using the job postings. Why we need to control for the demand shocks in our control, since that different industries may face different demand side shocks. For example, hospitalities like hotels and restaurants, they suffer the most during the pandemic. But other industries like some essential workers or like hospitals, they do not suffer in terms of the demand side. So we need to control for the demand side shock. We also control for the months of year fixed effect to account for the seasonality. We find that the interaction term between disaster and telework are significantly negative on all 3 labor market outcome measurements, both full sample and mesh sample. This suggests that the telework can help to mitigate the employment problems during the COVID-19. Specifically, a 10 percent point increase in telework penetration rates can offset the increase in the unemployment due to the disaster by 20%, that in work absence by 23%, and that in layoff by 23%. Now, we further investigate whether telework can mitigate the gender inequality in labor market outcomes. To this end, we use an occupation-based telework penetration rate for each gender group. Specifically, we measure the telework penetration rate for each gender of each occupation. Here, what we are interested in the 3-way interaction of beta 6. It should be negative if telework has a stronger positive effect on females than males. We include the same set of controls as before and fixed effects as before. Here are the results. Consistently, we found that telework can help mitigate the employment problem during the disaster, and disaster has a stronger impact on females. But more importantly, the 3-way interaction is significantly negative. This suggests that there is a stronger impact of telework on females, which helps to reduce the gender inequality in unemployment during the COVID-19. To further visualize the gender heterogeneity in the telework on labor market outcomes, we try to classify workers into 4 groups based on their gender and telework penetration rates. For example, male telework group means that males in the occupation with high telework penetration rates. Similarly, we can have another three groups. As the time trend plot shows, all four groups follow a similar trend before the pandemic. However, during the pandemic, the difference between teleworkable and non-teleworkable males denoted by the blue line is smaller than the difference between the teleworkable and non-teleworkable females denoted by the red line, which suggests that telework has a stronger positive impact on females in reducing the unemployment. At last, we further investigate the impact of digital infrastructure accessibility to provide more managerial implications. We use the four groups identified previously and interact them with the disaster dummy and the local digital infrastructures. A three-way interaction results show that the higher the internet accessibility, the stronger the impact of telework on both males and females, which is shown in the bottom red box. Now, we want to examine how the digital infrastructure accessibility influences individuals' telework take-up rates. Here, the dependent variable is the COVID telework, which measures whether the respondent teleworked for pay at any time during the past week due to the COVID-19 disaster. Our results indicate that the higher the internet accessibility results in greater take-up of telework for females, and thus help reduce the gender inequality in the labor market outcomes. Due to the time limit, now we finally want to decompose the impact of telework into the endowment effect and coefficient effect. Due to the time limit, we only expand results for the unemployment. That is the first line of this table. Here, we look at the first number of 10.2%. Here, the 10.2% means the increase in the unemployment rates due to the COVID-19 disaster is 10.2 more for females than their male counterparts. Given the enlarged gender inequality in the employment, we want to examine whether telework can help to mitigate this enlarged gender gap. Our results indicate that females' higher telework rates can reduce the gender inequality by 23.6%. And similarly, the larger marginal effect of telework on females can reduce the gender inequality by 36%. In total, the telework can help to mitigate the gender inequality by 59%. Here we use a plot to summarize our results, and we found that the upper box means that there's a increased gender inequality during the pandemic. Fortunately, our results show that the telework can help to reduce the 59% of the inequality. More specifically, 24% is addressed by the endowment effect, which means that females are more likely to take up the teleworkable jobs, and 36% is addressed by the coefficient effect, which means that females they purely benefit more from the telework. We also conduct a series of robustness checks and find highly consistent results. And now let's summarize our results. Our study found that COVID-19 disaster has a disproportionate impact on females' unemployment, and also telework can help to mitigate the unemployment problem during the COVID-19 disaster. This mitigation effect is stronger for females than their male counterparts. And the mitigation effect of telework is stronger in the areas with higher digital infrastructure accessibilities for both males and females. A higher digital infrastructure accessibility can help to increase the take-up of the telework for females, and thus help to reduce the gender inequality in unemployment. Finally, telework can help to reduce the gender inequality in unemployment, not only due to the higher telework take-up ratio among females, but also primarily due to the stronger marginal effect of telework on females. We expect our results are generalizable to future regional disasters that limits people's mobility in areas with different levels of digital infrastructure's accessibility. Our results also provide implications of telework to improve job continuity for females during certain life stages when physical presence in the workplace could be a challenge. All suggestions, feedbacks, and comments are highly welcome. Thank you. Please email us your suggestions and feedbacks.